it will be useful for the consequences of my conference I'm going to present now. In order to understand the four founding personalities of our congregation, we have to first put ourselves in the geographical area of the places where we were founded. It is so important. We are determined by geographical identity. And for us to say Italy, it's one of the countries in Europe. And for somebody in Europe to say, I am from Milwaukee, doesn't say anything. So, our congregation was founded when?
1732. 1732.
1732. That's what they say. That's what we recognize as a liturgical founding event of our congregation. How many people participated at that Holy Mass where we were founded?
Not me.
5 people.
Ah.
How many of them are still were redemptors or became redemptors? Yes, who?
Francis and a brother.
Brother didn't participate. So, only Alphonsus. Whenever on the 9th of November we canonize that very event and with the Holy Face read those names and surnames, only one of them is redempted. Remember this. In that very group, at that very Mass, there was a lay person. There was a lay person, Silvestro Tosques. He was present there from the very beginning of our congregation. And I think it is important for you to remember that. Whenever Redemptors will put into doubts your mission in our congregation, say to them, go to our origins, and you will understand. There's a lay person in this very moment when our congregation was founded. We were founded in Italy. This is Italy how it looks today. And this is Italy how it looked in the time of St. Alphonsus. We have to understand some characteristics because they are crucial to understand also our history and the history of our origins. We were founded in so-called Kingdom of Naples, which embraced territory like this. So you can imagine half of Italy and Syria, belong to that kingdom, the gray color or greenish color. The yellow color was the Papal State, the kingdom of a pope. So basically, this country belonged to 2 important people, the Pope and the King of Naples. In the time where we were founded, the Kingdom of Naples belonged to 2 countries, to Spain and Austria, but belonged also to French. So today we can say that St. Alphonsus spoke Neapolitan dialect, Italian, Spanish, French, and probably some German. It is important to understand that. In the territory of the Kingdom of Naples, there were 2 enclaves, like 2 islands that belonged to the Pope. One is here, Ponte Corvo, and one is here, Benevento. This has its meaning. When our congregation was suppressed in the Kingdom of Naples, Redemptorists founded new communities here. Here is the place called Cifelli and Frosinone, from where St. Clement started his mission. So we have to understand and keep it in mind that in that very time, whole Europe was under huge change. Illuminism started, new reforms, new wars. We were founded in a very complex times. Germany didn't exist. Italy didn't exist. Germany as it is today, in that time was just a form of separated kingdoms. Italy, the same. France started to acquire its identity. The same Spain. In that time, 1732, one guy called Alfonso Maria de Liguori started our congregation. So, but as it is in the history of this world, our congregation did not fall from the skies. And it was a very complex process. I would say it is silly to say that our congregation was born in 45 minutes when you say the Mass. Besides, as you know already, from that group only one became Redemptorists. It took a long time, this founding process. If we recognize 1732 as the year when we were founded, how many years it took us to elaborate the first rule? Father Dominic, our first rule, when it was accepted? 1749. So 17 years, a bunch of priests were running in the kingdom of Naples with no room. Imagine the situation like this today. No room. This makes our history a very complex work. And we have to remember the other issue that is important, and we have to switch to another PowerPoint presentation. When I speak this broken English, you understand? Do you? I hope so. If not, I can switch to Italian. It will be much easier. For Polish, that would be perfect.
Very good.
Okay. So, no written rule, and different personalities involved. Different personalities involved in that founding process. Today, our historians recognize 4 founding personalities. At least 4. We can add many more, but these are crucially important, each and every one of them. First, you might be surprised, Maria Celeste Crostarosa. Second, Tommaso Falcoia. Third, Alfonso de Liguori. The fourth, Gennaro Sarnelli. Let us examine those personalities briefly, and at the end, let us draw some consequences. Okay? This is the aim of our conference this afternoon. Just be merciful to me. In Europe now, it's almost 11 p.m. So if I fall asleep during my conference, don't wake me up. Okay, the first one. Let me just say that St. Alfonso probably never saw the face of Crostarosa. You know that?
Never what?
Never saw her face. When they met several times. They met always in the monastery of Scala, and it was the custom of the sisters, when they were about to meet somebody, to cover with a veil the face, and they met never directly, always through the kind of grill. So this is one of the first impressions. He never saw her face. Celeste Costa Rosa. Okay, those four personalities, they are all from Naples, born in Naples. It would be good to go to Naples, have a coffee, eat Neapolitan pizza, listen to the culture and the dialect they speak to understand. It is so important. But if you like to do that, please come for spirituality course. Okay, just briefly. Just briefly. She was born, you can see that. She was a nun. A Carmelite nun. And then she started the Visitation Convent at Scala. Whoever goes to Scala, I have some photos, but there is no time to show this, will have the impression that the monastery of Scala of the sisters does not resemble a building of a monastery. It looks rather like a school. There's a church, and beside this, a long, long building. It was a conservatory for girls. And then that building became the monastery of the Redemptorist sisters. So, she finds this monastery. But, what happened here? She leaves Scala. During her stay in Scala, she receives the vision of a room for the sisters, and then the vision of a new religious family with two branches, one contemplative and one active missionary. The monastery in Scala was under the jurisdiction of the Bishop Falcoia. We are going to examine this line. And here we have the first war between Celeste and Falcoia. There were some reasons of the conflict between Costa Rosa and Falcoia. The first one are theological visions coming from contemplation and the experience of the Spirit in Maria Celeste Costa Rosa. In the time, at the beginning of the 18th century, in Naples, in the whole Europe, all mystical experience was under huge suspicion. Was under the huge suspicion. So, her visions were not recognized as true. She writes a rule for a new congregation, for a new order. But Falcoia wants to be her spiritual director. He corrects the rule and he wants her to sign that rule. And she says, no, I cannot do that. He manages to convince the whole community of the sisters to vote against Costa Rosa and to send her away. And she does this in 1933. She goes down to Amalfi, then she will stay in some monasteries close to Foggia. Finally, she will found a new monastery in Foggia where she will die in the fame of sanctity. The people of Foggia will call her Holy Prioress. And you know, she was beatified 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. Canonical reason. Personality differences. Falcoia, the bishop who was in charge of the monastery of Scala, wanted her to be totally submitted. And she said, no. In her opinion, a spiritual director was not a superior. He wanted to be her superior. And she said, no, I recognize you as my spiritual director, but I have my conscience. And I am responsible only in front of God. Falcoya wanted her to obey him blindly. And she said, no. Now imagine the culture of that time and the courage of that woman. Alphonsus, he goes to Scala by coincidence. You know the story, or you don't know the story. Shall I say it briefly? Okay, so Alphonsus, when he became a priest, he was involved in some missionary associations. And he was really tired of work. So he decided that he would go for a little rest in the Amalfi coast. He wanted to arrive to another place, but because there was a tempest on the sea, he had to approach the shore and a little bit earlier. There he goes to the parish priest, to the pastor, asking, is here any place I can rest? And the priest says, yes, you have to climb up there. There is a hermitage, and you can rest there. It's called Santa Maria dei Monti. So Alphonsus, with some other people, climbs up to Santa Maria dei Monti. And while he is resting there, he has his first meeting with the pastors. He realizes that they are, as he writes, like beasts. Why? They have no Christian education. And he understands, how come? There are many priests in Naples. We are only maybe 20 kilometers from Naples, and you have abandoned people. If you go through Naples, through so-called Via Tribunali, where Alphonsus used to perform as a lawyer, you would pass by 15 churches. I'm not exaggerating. And 20 kilometers from Naples, on the mountains, there was no priest. And he says, I have to do something about this. He does not have the vision of founding a new congregation. But something is going to happen in his life. He says, I cannot agree with that. He goes back to Naples, but then, out of the sudden, he receives the invitation to preach a novena in Scala. When he goes to Scala to preach the novena and at the cathedral, Bishop Falcoya says, just go across the street. There's a civil nun there. She has a visions. You are a lawyer. You are a good priest. You are reasonable. Examine her. So, when he goes there and meets Crosta Rosa, what does she say to him? You have to be the leader of the new missionary congregation. I received that vision from the Lord, and he told me that. And they start to fight in the confessional. And the Tospes is hearing that in the church. Because Alphonsus says, how would you know that? How would you know that? It is impossible. And he knew that just a couple of months before, he had that very hard adventure, experience with the abandoned pastors. So we have to combine, unite those two people. Okay? I will go. Tommaso Falcoya. I'm going very briefly through this. I will give you the papers I wrote for this conference. There are 15 pages. And I will also give you the presentation. You can read later on. because here we have redemptorists, we have people with different knowledge of our origins. I will just speak like this. Do you like it? It's better? Then read the papers, yes? And then you will read them. Tommaso Falcoia. Why this bishop was so important for our congregation? Why ever we would list him between the founding personalities of our congregation? People say this is impossible. Why? Because of two reasons. Institutional level. Our congregation was born 1732, yes? Falcoia dies, Tommaso Falcoia dies, 1743. How many years? 11 years. 11 years. We have the protection of a bishop. Authority of a bishop. And we are sure that nobody can touch us. He was like an umbrella for the newborn group of missionaries. So the role of Falcoia is great in our congregation. Alphonsus very seldom had consulted the Bishop of Scala. For Falcoia, our congregation is one of many missionary congregations in Naples in that time. For 11 years, this guy was not able to elaborate a rule for our congregation. He was promising that to Alphonsus, and he could not do this. He could not do this. Alphonsus finally starts to write the rule privately. But Alphonsus made a vow. I will never disobey my spiritual director. So as long as Falcoia was alive, Alphonsus' hands were tied. Only in 1743, Alphonsus starts to elaborate our first rule. We have his notes in our archives in Rome that he does before 43, but he will be faithful to that vow until the death of Falcoia. As I said, Falcoia wanted us to be one of many congregations. Why new congregation? Because, as he says, people get too used to the old ones. This is why God wants a new congregation, but nothing more specific. He wanted us to be community of a almost monastic style, and we will do the missions. This was his proposal. He didn't share fully the vision of Alphonsus. I will say in a while what was Alphonsus' vision for us. But we don't have to criticize him. This was the spirit of that time. When Alphonsus will present our rule to the Holy See, 1748, 1 year before the approval, he will propose his vision. What comes out is Falcoia's vision. Our text was corrected fully. What Remerme writes in our book that when the rule was approved and Father Caffaro and Brother Tartaglione brings that news to Ciorani, everybody is rejoicing. That's exaggerated. Alphonsus says, all right, I get the approval. He is a lawyer. He knows we have to be approved. But he was not happy with the corrections. Because the corrections were made according to the style of that time and according to the proposal of Falcoia. Of course, Falcoia was already dead. And the correction said, Redemptorists will live in the community. The first aim of their existence will be the personal sanctity, and the second will be do the missions. And this vision lasted in our congregation until the Second Vatican Council. This is why, in between, the famous saying was invented: Redemptorists are Carthusians in the house and apostolate outside, which is all wrong. Which is all wrong. We are not monastic priests. We are not. What Father said, I fully agree. He used the term justice. I would say you bring the good news to the most abandoned. Now we have to know the distinction between abandoned and poor. You know the distinction? Or shall I explain it? Okay, let me ask questions. Let's say, in my family, my mother has the job and my father has the job. And we go to church every Sunday. They try to pray every day, rosary, and they pray before they go to bed. Out of the sudden, they lose their job. And we are 5 children in the family. Who they are, abandoned or poor? Poor. Okay. Now, let's say in my sister's family, they live a relatively good life. They are not rich, but with the job they have, they can easily make living. But the problem is that they have to go to the nearest church 8 kilometers every day, and they cannot afford to buy a car. Who they are? Abandoned or poor? We are for the abandoned. This is our moment. We are for the abandoned. Alphonsus uses always the word abandoned. Abandoned. Then, with all our expansion, especially into the Latin America, the poor came out. But you know, not every poor is abandoned, and not every abandoned is poor. There are not poor abandoned, but there are also abandoned poor. But you have to understand the distinction. The distinction. This is so important that we understand. It is crucially important. Let's move forward to another personality. You know this guy, no?
Yeah.
To summarize his life, we can say that we can see 3 exodus in his life. The word exodus, you know. How shall we translate it into English? Exodus.
Come out of.
Yeah, come out. Yes. Okay. He passes through 3 exodus. The first one is when he loses his cause at the court. It is July 1723. He loses his cause in the course not because he had neglected something as a lawyer or advocate. No. The newest research brings us the conviction that the cause was bribed. This is why Alphonsus says, if somebody can buy even justice, or if justice can be bought, there is nothing. This is the world. And I don't want to belong to this world. This is the first strong exodus. The second one. Alphonsus, you know, later on he becomes the cleric and then he is ordained a priest. His first parish is Sant'Angelo a Segni. In the first years of his priesthood, he is a rigorist, according to the perfect style of his time. He is a rigorist. But with the experience of a poor people, he understands that this is not the way. If you are rigorist, what's the opposite extreme? Lax. So, here you are rigorous. Here you just say, do whatever you wish. Which way prefers Alphonsus? The most difficult. In the middle. You have to examine case by case. And where is the criterion? The conscience. So, the biggest value that Redemptorists brought into the church, it is the primacy of the conscience. The primacy of the conscience over the law. And he changes his approach through the experience of the evening chapels and through the sacrament of penance. When I bring our conference through the Naples for a tour, many of them ask me, Father, would you show us where are these evening chapels? They come from Asia, Africa, different countries, no? Where are those evening chapels we heard about? I said, one is here, and one is over there, and the other one is over there. Where? There's no building. There were no buildings, no structures. It was done on the streets. It was done on the streets. So everybody can come. One experience very strong for me from last month. One of the Italian Redemptorists who is ministering in Naples at the moment, he goes out. It's recorded, okay, I will say it. He goes out at night to say masses for poor people on the market squares and sidewalks. I say, why do you do that? And he says, what do you think? They are smelly, dirty, and poor. But they have their dignity. They are ashamed to come to church because they know they smell, because they know they are dirty. So I go to them. And the third Exodus is this experience on the mountain, where he sees people totally abandoned. There was no hope, no rights, no gospel, no Christian values. And then, at the end, the religious project of Costa Rosa. His intuition meets with the vision Costa Rosa had experienced. And they are one. We have to understand our mission in the church according to the Gospel of John. There is a vine and two branches. They all come from the same source. Both the order of the nuns and the congregation. Our name was changed. Alphonsus wanted us to be the congregation of the Most Holy Savior. The same with the nuns. The name were changed. What does it mean? That in our origins, it is not the law which is of the first importance, but life. It took us 17 years to elaborate the rule. What does it teach us? It teaches us that life comes first, then the law, then the structure. What is important, it is a presence and mission, and then the structure. Today, quite often we have the structure with the presence, but no mission. And we keep our structure only to be there, with no mission. It is, for Alphonsus, it is not to go and do missions. For Alphonsus, the Redemptorist community becomes mission. At the beginning of the congregation, they were locking houses and moving the structure of the community to a mission. There was a superior, there was a bursar, there was a cook, there were the people, fathers who were hearing confessions, and the preachers. The whole community becomes mission. Before they say anything, they become mission. This was the vision. This was Alphonsus' vision. And this is a revolutionary vision, which could not be accepted. It was a prophetic vision, to the point that when he presents his writings to be accepted in Rome, they are corrected. They are corrected. For Alphonsus, it was a community as a sign, and then we preach missions. We become mission, and we become a community in the middle of the most abandoned. We don't go to the abandoned from our castles and residences, but we settle in the middle, and we share their life. In such a way, we give value to them, but also they give value to us. Another thing, Alphonsus never wanted us to be located outside of the cities because he wanted us to be isolated. This is wrong understanding. The only criterion that our houses were located outside of the cities was to be accessible. All our first houses are built in the shape of the letter L. Here, there was a chapel or the church and community wing, and here, retreat house. So, a community was a mission when they were going out to preach, and it was a mission home where they were giving retreats. This was his style, and this was his proposal. We have to remember that. Okay, the fourth one, because we have only 15 minutes left. Gennaro Sarnelli, a little bit younger than Alphonsus, but also coming from a noble family. But nobility of Alphonsus and nobility of Sarnelli, we cannot compare. If Alphonsus was noble, it was of this stature. If Sarnelli was noble, it was of this height. Alphonsus' father received nobility from his wife. Alphonsus' father made his career in the Navy from the lowest ranks. Finally, he became the captain. He gained nobility. Sarnelli was born as a noble. So, they become friends in the evening chapels, in different associations. They were preaching together missions, belonging to different associations. They were both lawyers. Who was that? It was her who told me that visited the house of the Alphonsus in Marianella. Next to that house, it was a property of Sarnelli. It was Gennaro Sarnelli's father who gave us the territory for our first Redemptorist house in Chorai. This is our mother house. Scala was never Redemptorist. We celebrated the Mass in Scala, 9 of November 1732. We lived for a short time in the hired house of Anastasios. It was never ours. And when we left Scala in 1738, we returned to Scala after 200 years. So Scala, it is the place we were born, but has nothing of the Redemptorist. We did some missions from Scala. It is important to us because it is our kindergarten. And this is the story I said at the beginning. Do we want to return to Scala? Impossible. This is why, after these people, there is a Clement Hopal, Joseph Passerat, and other personalities who brought our congregation in all over the world. But the inspiration comes from this. We should recognize, and if we ever made a damage to Crosta Rosa, it has to be justified. She received the vision that Falcoya shared, corrected, like for example, fathers tell me, you were brought in the mentality of the 12 virtues. We were to imitate every month, yes? This comes from the vision of Crosta Rosa. Falcoya adds 3 more. He was very practical. And we were doing and living in that spirit for centuries. Without knowing that who was the author of that structure. We should be really grateful to God that these 2 people managed to come together and share what they have received from God. Alphonsus receives his inspiration, but charismatical input comes from Crosta Rosa. It makes sense. 1 vine, 2 branches. 1 source, 2 branches. Contemplative and active. What's the spirit of our sisters? They want to be living memory of Jesus in today's world. What does it mean? To bring the world in front of God by prayer and adoration. They are not nuns like Benedictine nuns or Carmelites. No, it's different. They serve the most abandoned by prayer. And the other side, it is a male congregation of the missionaries who go to the most abandoned. But we know this well. If we go and preach our mission without contemplative approach, it doesn't work. We go and preach missions because we see in those people most abandoned. And in the most abandoned we see the face of Jesus. So we are complementary, contemplative and active, all together. And we should really have the courage to recognize that. These are the facts. For many years, when Crosta Rosa was banished from Scala, you can go there and see the chronicle with the pages ripped down. Every memory was cancelled. It was in the middle of the 20th century that we managed to recognize the rule of Crosta Rosa. It was Father Capone. And you know how? Through the economy books. Everything else was cancelled. To this point that if you go to our mother house in Chorani, in the church, if you see at the ceiling, you see the picture presenting St. Alphonsus giving the rules to the fathers and to the nuns. Crosta Rosa does not exist. We have to be grateful to this gentleman because he gave a great support to Alphonsus and his family. And we have to be grateful to this gentleman. 3 of them are already on the altars. I don't think so he will come, but still we have to be grateful to him. Without his guidance, without his protection, his inspiration, of course, very limited. Today it is easy to judge, but he gave us like a shield, protection, and we managed to develop our strength in the 17 years of existence. I believe that without his protection, it would be very hard to survive. But then, as I said, and I will finish, then as I said, after these 4 personalities, we have more. I will speak something tomorrow about Clement. If we didn't have Clement, no, we will not exist. We will finish just like many other missionaries' congregation in the kingdom of Naples of that time. Today they don't exist anymore. The congregation of Bishop Falcoya does not exist. It was Clement and his intuition that gave us new dimension. But the whole started from here, from this gentleman. For many years, even Redemptorists did not recognize him as Redemptorist. Why? Because he was not in Scala in the 32, in November, he was not there. And he was not in Chorani in 1740 when they took the vow of perseverance. He was not there. So they say, when he made his vows.